Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm doing a video basically to kind of explain trickle-down economics in terms of what's it mean in terms of a simplistic state for people that aren't necessarily economists or have a finance background. I'm going to try to keep things simple in terms of perspective. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is the NDP constantly on their posts talk about Harper's use trickle-down economics, but I'm not even sure that the left or these people of the NDP truly understand what trickle-down economics mean. I think what's happening is they see a bunch of rhetoric terms in terms of corporate cuts or seen other taxation cuts and programs, and they assume that that's the only aspect that Harper's focused on. So what I'm going to try to do throughout this presentation is first of all explain trickle down and talk about some of the policies at a high level that basically have been driving the various economic activity in the country. So what trickle-down economics in a nutshell means is the people that create the wealth, and that's the top 1%, that's the corporations. If you give them tax cuts, the rationale with trickle-down is they will take those tax cuts, feed them through the system through hiring and other responses to help in economic growth. Now, in general, if you just used one type of cuts, and that's just cutting taxation for corporations and stuff like that, then in essence it likely will fail because it doesn't really help. If you've got high consumer debt, high consumer personal taxes, it will not help if you only give one angle of policy. That's not what Stephen Harper did when he took office. Stephen Harper took a multitude of tax approaches. He first looked at personal income tax. He wanted to give more income tax back to people, so disposable income. So he wanted to put more money in people's pockets to make decisions. He also wanted to reduce the consumption taxes, so the stuff that you're paying for consumer purchases, with after-tax dollars to get more value for your money to support consumer spending, which I'll go into a secondary slide. The other area he wanted to do, he wanted to bring corporation tax rates down to make sure we were competitive for business investment, because it's very competitive to attract business investment. It's not just about corporate taxes. There's other aspects in terms of tax policy, trade policies that come into play. But Stephen Harper wanted to ensure that he kept taxation rates down, and that's the other thing he did. The other point he did that fits into this, which the left never talk about else, and this is the key aspect of redistribution of wealth, is when you get into social programs like healthcare and education, because all that revenue that they collect from taxation, whether it's personal, corporate, consumption taxes, all go into a bucket, and in that bucket that income is transferred out. That's how we redistribute wealth down to social programs. While Harper's continually grown the social programs at a 6% growth overall, and for healthcare, and about 3.5% to 4% for Canadian social transfer, which is your basically daycare, post-secondary school funds. So that's that bucket of money we transfer down. Harper's taken that money and redistributed it back to the provinces. He's basically doubled that money going back to the provinces in terms of how they've handled the healthcare and the education side to kind of better support social programs. That statement's never been made. All you hear from the NDP is corporate tax cuts, because they can play on that as a nasty corporations. They're not going to talk about the personal tax cuts that you benefited from, because they don't want people to know that. They're not going to talk about the consumption taxes, which Thomas Mulcair has been clearly saying that he won't raise because he treats that tax as regressive, as it hurts consumers and it hurts the middle class to low income earners. Yet Harper supported that. So can you see where Mulcair is a little bit of a hypocrite? He basically only is going to talk about one angle of policy because he wants to play on the motion. So let's talk about disposable income. Lower tax rate in theory should allow people to put money in their pocket and drive consumer spending. Now, I'm showing you a trend here. Since 2010, consumer spending has gone up by $67 billion. So in essence, all these tax cuts that's filtered through the system, along with probably some pay increases, have allowed people to spend money. Now, the argument will be that I've talked to different people about this, is it's the wrong way to reduce GST, because all it does is promote people to inherit debt. Now, people are going to spend money, they need to be responsible about it, but Stephen Harper is giving them that power to make decisions. And that's what's happened. Consumer spending is a key driver for the Canadian economy. As I've talked before, when you look at the Canadian economy, it's exports, government spending and consumer spending that drives it. We need strong consumer spending because that sets the chain of reaction. Second thing that happens with these lower tax rates, and we've seen the evidence there, is the C.D. Howell Institute. It says people are saving more money. So that after-tax money that they're putting into savings and RRSPs or other investments, they're putting that money aside. We also know that they're taking advantage of the tax-free saving accounts, and it's not just the high-income people that benefit. The middle-income people and the low-income people have been using tax-free savings account to put money aside. That money is earned with no interest or interest income. Now, the reason why the NDP doesn't like it, because they want access to that money. They want access to that money so they can make decisions to put in their CPP plans. That's what it's about. They don't want you. They want them to control the retirement side. So in essence, if you look at this, the lower tax rates actually has driven success in the areas. Now, corporation tax cuts. The redistribution of that happens in multiple ways. Canada is a branch plant country. So some of that corporate tax cuts would flow through as in terms of dividends to the parent company, whether it's in the U.S. or the Dutch or whatever country, and that's where you see it in the balance of payments. However, some of that does flow back into capital expenditures. We're constantly seeing that some companies have put investment back into the business, so we are seeing capital expenditures have grown. But you're never going to hear that statement from statements from Mulcair or Trudeau, because they're just basically trying to pander for votes. They're not going to talk about realistic stats because they don't want to talk about it. But what you may hear about that is from the Broadbent Institute that Andrew Jackson did a survey, but his survey was completely flawed. He basically didn't restate the numbers based on volume of manufacturers over time to look at that relationship. He basically just looked at a graph and basically made some assumptions, and those assumptions were not valid because they weren't restated. Now let's talk about the other piece where wealth gets transferred. When we collect that bucket, we put that bucket into money goes to healthcare and education, as well as we've increased and created a dedicated fund for infrastructure. That money is a way of redistributing that wealth from the top earners and from corporations and putting it down to people in need, especially with healthcare and education. I've attached a video that you can go take a look at. This video is a CNN video that actually validates that assumption that Canada's done a very good job of redistribution of the wealth. So all these comments that the NDP is saying that Harper has done a poor job or uses trickle-down economics, they're only seeing one angle of corporate tax cuts. They're not seeing all the other programs he put in play to support redistribution of wealth. So the reason why I pointed that out, it's very easy for the NDP to basically run on corporate and not talk about the other policies, because guess what? They couldn't win an election if they knew exactly what Stephen Harper has been doing.